So this video was actually supposed to be something completely different. I was going to team up with fellow theorist EdibleIncredible and predict what the second DLC would be about. After 2 hours of writing a thought-out script, I then found out that he basically came up with the exact same theory in a previous video. So unfortunately I had to scrap that idea. However, if you wanted to know about my thoughts on it, feel free to check out both of his videos on the topic. Besides that though, I was sort of trying to come up with another thing to talk about. The Mifa episode was a good one to try, but I need to do more research before I even dare touch that theory. So I think it's finally time to dip into a bit of the Zelda timeline. Okay, so first of all, this isn't what you think it's going to be at all. I'm not going to sit here and debate about what timeline it is in or go the other route and debunk MatPat's video because that seems to be the craze these days. All I will say is that there's enough evidence to prove them in any of the three timelines, but there's also enough evidence to prove that they don't go in any of the three timelines. And as logical as it seems to make it be a converged timeline between the three, that doesn't really make any sense to me. But you know, I'm just a Deku scrub, so what do I know? What I'll be talking about today is a bit of a bigger matter here. And no, there is no mind-blowing, shocking reveals for today, like how Koga could be Xant's descendant. I heard you guys really loved that one. But it is simply one question all of us have after playing Breath of the Wild. What now? I mean, we just got the biggest Zelda game that has ever been created. And from the ending of Breath of the Wild, it doesn't really seem like there's going to be another game taking place after it. This looks a lot like it's going to be the last form of Ganon. But then if we look at the Japanese translations, we can hear Zelda say the following. He's an embodiment of hatred and grudge that arose in distant antiquity and revives again and again, no matter how many times he's destroyed. This implies that Ganon is only defeated for now, and will never stop returning. But at the same time, on the English version, Zelda says this in the bonus ending.
Although Ganon is gone for now, there is still so much more for us to do.
However, then when you go back to the Japanese version, it simply says, the threat of calamity is gone, has passed. Wait, what the heck? Is the Japanese version contradicting itself? Will he return or won't he? Ugh, you're killing me here, Nintendo. So, on one hand, it is implied that Ganon won't return. However, there is also proof that he will. And there's also the fact that in Skyward Sword, Demise pretty much says that the evil will never go away. Though this is not the end. My hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. So this brings up three possibilities. 1, this isn't the last form of Ganon and he will be revived again in the future. 2, somehow Demise's curse has been broken. Or 3, another villain will take the spotlight from now on. And honestly, when comparing the second and third option to the first seems most likely. Yeah, Demise's curse could break, but I feel like that just wouldn't happen. And sure, while some games have had a different villain besides Ganondorf, none of them have stolen his spotlight. He is still the main villain in the Legend of Zelda series. Now, yeah, we could spend all day thinking about what happens after Breath of the Wild. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. Because the Legend of Zelda timeline is actually a lot bigger and more complicated than you would expect. Let me explain. This entire time we have known the Zelda timeline is split in one specific game, and that is Ocarina of Time. In that game there are 3 possible outcomes. The hero wins and goes back 7 years to be a child. The hero wins, but this time stays in the future timeline. And then the third one. The hero is defeated and Ganon rules Hyrule. But here is the thing. If the timeline split is based off of whether the hero succeeds or fails, then that means that every single game of the Legend of Zelda series has a timeline split of at the very least 2 things. You win, or you lose. And this is the part where things start to get really messy. If we just take the first 3 games before the split and gave each one a minimum split of 2, being the hero succeeds or fails, you're looking at 8 possible results. And if we counted each as a game, that's 15 potential Zelda games. And that is only looking at the possible results of 3 games. Yeah, there may be some areas where a game wouldn't exist, but you are still looking at a lot of results. And what about games that could have not 2 possible endings, but more than that? Yeah, in Ocarina of Time, there's a child, adult, and failed timelines, but just look at Wind Waker. Yeah, you have both timelines where Ganondorf is killed and Link survives, or Link is killed and Ganondorf survives. But after that, what about if Ganon actually touched the Triforce and his wish came true? That would add another timeline. And what if Zelda, Link, Ganondorf, and the king died in the flooding? Then the kingdom would still be saved, but everyone still died, making Phantom Hourglass never occur. And don't even get me started on Majora's Mask. That game is all about going back in time to completely change the results. So knowing all this, what I now want to find out is, according to the Zelda timeline, how many games could technically exist if we assume that each game only splits into 2 different timelines. Let's cut out 2 of the games in the Fallen Hero timeline, so no matter what path we go, there is a line of 7 games. Now, this is going to be a bit annoying to do without an equation, so we're going to make one. And it is as simple as multiplying the number of timeline splits for each game by itself 7 times, since that is the amount of games we are using. So we go ahead and solve this equation, and the total amount of possible outcomes is 128. Let me remind you, 7 games with the minimum amount of time splits gives 128 different outcomes. But if we were to look at the amount of games that it could create, it would be 255 possible Zelda games. So at this point, I am sure you understand. Nintendo could simply drop another timeline if they really wanted to. And if you think that's unlikely, let me remind you that the very first game in the timeline, Skyward Sword, released in 2011. If Nintendo had no problem releasing a game taking place before Ocarina of Time, 13 years after Ocarina of Time was made, then it shouldn't sound surprising that they might create a whole other timeline. Also, while production for future Zelda games will take longer, I'm sure that they will continue to make more small games like Triforce Heroes. Can't wait to play the new Link's Crossbow Training Deluxe when it eventually reaches store shelves. Anyways, I've been Nintendo Black Crisis, and I'll see you in 2023 when the next big Zelda game's released.